All right, good morning everybody. It is the end of May here. The drill's all cleaned up. We actually got a spot for your rinse on it. We've got hard water at the farm, so it leaves things a little bit streaky at times. But we got we got some rain on it. Cleaned her up really nice. We didn't really wash the toolbar, we just washed the cart because that's where all the fertilizer is. The rest of the dust a good rain and it'll come off. So this is going to be my last video about the drill, probably until next year, or I have a couple things maybe we'll work on in the middle of summer. But I figured I'd dedicate this video to answering questions. Now I had 5 or 6 questions come up either through YouTube or my shorts feed throughout the year, and I either answered some in comments, I answered 1 or 2 of them incorrectly because my math was wrong, and there's 1 or 2 that I just didn't have the answers to at the time. So I'm gonna go over all of those. So question number 1 was, how big is it? And I'm guessing they said, well, we know it's 70 feet, we know it's 1,000 bushels, but like, what are the actual dimensions is what I'm going to touch on. So I've got them written down. So the Delta track, I know roughly from the nose to the hitch, about 22 feet. The toolbar from that hitch to where the cart hitches is about 37 according to the website. So let's paste this off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't buy that. I'm gonna go off of my pacing. I got 10. Well, I'm gonna call that 33 feet. So we got 22, 33, 55. And the website says that this guy is about 50 feet. And we'll pace it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, be pretty close. And probably, wait, 14. No, that's 40 something feet. I'm going to say to the end of here is about 46 feet. So what do we have? We got right around 100 feet from the nose to the tail. Now things aren't perfectly straight, but close enough. Around 100 feet. When the toolbar is folded up in transport mode, they say it is 18 feet high. So that would be to, I guess, the top of these tires would probably be the highest, or the outside ones, or not those, these would be the highest. So 18 feet there. And it said like 29 feet wide. I don't buy that, but if you go from the fold points plus probably 5 feet, you know what? It's probably not that far off. Yeah, so about 29 feet wide at the top because it kind of plexes out a bit and then comes back in. And you're adding your shanks and your tires and whatever else. So that's the highest point is 18 feet. And also the widest at the top is the 29 feet, apparently. The cart, I looked up and I do kind of believe it. They say it's 16 feet high. Typically for me, that's about 8 feet. And I'm gonna say there's all of that again. So 16 feet to the top of the handrail. I'm gonna say roughly 12.5 to the upper working platform. So that is our overall dimensions on how big it is. It's 70 feet wide. It's probably actually a little wider. It's got the little stumps that stick out beyond that, but you're supposed to have 6 inches on each side because you have a 6 inch there, you have a 6 inch there, so you know what I mean. for your laps to work out perfectly, you're right around 70 feet wide in the field. So the next question I got, and this is where I screwed up, how much does it weigh? And so I'm going to give you a total weight, or sorry, I'm going to give you individual weights, and then I'm going to give you a total to think about too. So when that question was asked, this is where I botched one of the answers. I did fertilizer density on pounds per bushel instead of pounds per cubic feet. So there's 1.24 cubic feet per bushel, and these are bushel tanks. So it goes 60, 480, 300, and 160 at the back. Now, the cart itself, when it's empty, they say is 35,000 pounds. And the heaviest we ever had it, and we never looked at what the scale said for this, but the heaviest we ever did was when we were doing wheat, and we had tanks 1 and 3 full of wheat. Now, we didn't get every bushel in there that they say. Part of it is from treating, just the way it fluffs up a little bit, so we treated our seed. So I just took off about 10% because I figured that's about what we were taking off. And so 60 and 360 minus 36. I had that figured out. When we had it filled, we had how much? 19,800 pounds of wheat. And then we had 2 and 4 were fertilizer, so that's 640 bushels of fertilizer. Now I did this both ways, but at 60.3 pounds per bushel, or sorry, 63 pounds per bushel of fertilizer, kind of weird. That comes out to 40,300, and all in, the cart weighs 95,000 pounds, give or take. That's the heaviest that we've had it. The toolbar, according to the paper that I found, says it is roughly, where's the weight of that? 43,000 pounds. Initially, I'm like, that's a lot. And then you start looking around, and each of these shanks, they're not light. All these cylinders. Yeah, 43,000 I think is high, but believable at the same time. So we'll see on that. And the Delta Track, I think if I remember right, it was about 55,000 pounds. So all together, 55 plus 43 plus 95 is like 190 some thousand pounds. So we don't do that going up and down the road. You know, if we're going from one field a couple miles to the other one, that's one thing. But if we're, how do we still keep catching these? Oh God, we catch about 20 of these a year. Throw that in the back of the truck. So if you're meeting us on the highway, highly unlikely that we weigh 193,000 pounds. We usually try to fill, like if we're just going 2 miles up and down the road on a grid road, yeah, maybe we'll go 12 mile an hour and just poke along. But when we're on the highway, we like to be, up at full speed. We don't want to overload the cart. So usually we try our best to have it maximum half full. A lot of times we'll maybe fill early or just enough. I shouldn't say, yeah, we'd fill part way through or just enough to finish the field. Or we won't do a full fill knowing that we're going to be finishing the field. And yeah, okay, we got 60 acres left. We'll fill it full. We'll be less than half. But, oh, we've got 20 acres left. Well, we'll just fill it part way. Yeah, it's a little more screwing around, but it's a lot less screwing around than having to try and put a set of tires on that because they snapped off bouncing going down the road. That's our thoughts on that. Another question we got was, how much do we get on a fill? Well, that's gonna vary based on seed rate and all this. So with wheat, we were getting about 115-ish on a fill, and I believe that was limited by fertilizer, if I remember right. So it was 10, and so we were putting down about 325 pounds of our blend. Wheat was in 1 and 3, fertilizer in 2 and 4. With durum, I think we had it figured that it would, so with wheat, I think we had enough for 140 acres on a fill, but the fertilizer we could only get 115. Oh, I can't remember. So the next question is, how much were we getting on a fill? Well, that's going to depend on a few things, whether we're doing variable rate or not, what products are in, what we're seeding, what seed rates, because we do some mixy-matchy stuff going on. With canola, it was the simplest because we'd put a mini bulk in the front, or 2, and then fertilizer, fertilizer, fertilizer. That would give us about 140-ish or a little more acres on a fill, limited by fertilizer. On wheat, I want to say it was about 115. We didn't do any barley this year, or peas or lentils, so I'm not sure what the math would have been on that. I do have it on an Excel sheet somewhere. Another question, I'm going to lump a few questions in, I shouldn't say together, but back to back to back. How long does it take to fill? Well, we never actually timed it, and we don't have a tender trailer, so we do have a little more fussing about. Usually we fill the fertilizer first, and that, that's kind of awkward sometimes, just moving from compartment to compartment. A big thing is trying to get the semi perfectly parallel. If you're nosed in or you're nosed out, you can have a little more mucking about. If you're nice and straight, it can be fill that one, and then you kind of creep the semi forward and you fill the back 2 on canola. It's pretty simple. Or with wheat, it's like fill, and then get the semi out of the way, and then you get the conveyor set up to go there and then there. And it's not bad. I'm going to say 35 minutes to 40 minutes. And that's from, well, that's from the time Dad pulls up to the time he leaves. We don't necessarily go from shank up to shank down because we have enough manpower to do it, but usually we like to leave the semi and the grain truck and whatever at the entrance to the field. So a lot of times the cart will have to come over, I don't know, 2-3 minutes out of the way and then go back at the end. So that's, I'd say 35 minutes is probably believable. Next question was, what do you think of the new conveyor? I really like it. It hauls pretty good. If it's dry though, holy shit, do you get zapped. So that's something else. It just makes a lot of static, and we haven't figured out the trick is not to touch the handrails or the bin lids or the grating at the same time that you're touching the spout. And that's where all the static goes, and it wants to go to the ground. We threw a grounding chain on. That didn't help. So I don't know. I would have thought there'd be enough ground from that sitting on the ground, but maybe the paint's resisting it. I don't know. While I'm here, what do I think about the air guard? I like it. I don't love it. As you can see, we disconnected the snorkels. That was like an hour into day one, we kept on having plugging issues. Now, they do say that we should be cutting the hoses short and going over. I just unhooked it. I think the snorkels were a waste of money, because we only gain ourselves 3-4 feet. Maybe, and the reason I left the snorkels on is if we do decide to put one on the Seed, then maybe there's some more value drawn from a little higher. But I just took the adapter off and I put the standard air guard kit on. It works good. We went through some pretty damp conditions a couple times. The one night I was seeding into the rain for a good hour, and it got to the point where it's like, we're gonna start doing a clumpy job. I better shut it down. Not that we were seeing any blockage. It warms up the air as advertised. You definitely notice it. It's probably 30 to 40 degrees air. Like, it kind of feels like a hot tub, but I will say that reduces the airflow a lot. So we were doing 350 pounds at 4 mile an hour when we were doing canola. We never had plugging issues. And we were doing 325 at 5 mile an hour. And again, we didn't really have issues, except when we were doing the 325, there were a few times doing variable rate where it really upped my rate up to about 360, I think, 370. And you can see there's 2 or 3 of these that have long flat runs, more than 2 or 3, probably 10 of them. That if they're lifted, I think they need to be shortened a couple of inches, and we'll probably do that. But they would plug up there, not down at the boot. You just go up and you'd shake them and they'd blow out. So if I was expecting, like I could see the prescription, and I see that it was calling for a little heavier, I'd usually downshift a gear, just so I didn't have to get out and unblock anything. You do notice, if you go underneath, the fans even at when we were running canola, I think we had the canola fan down to 3,000 RPM or something like that, and the fertilizer fan was going closer to 4,000, and there was more air coming out of the seed than the fertilizer. So I blame the air guard for that. It didn't really obstruct us, but I don't think it worked perfectly. I think it gained us hours. I do think that. What do we think about the mud scrapers? If you didn't watch my other video, we've had mud scrapers for a long time, and you can see they do a pretty good job of shedding the mud. Most of the ones that have mud built up don't have a whole lot. I've seen cheaper versions of mud scrapers out there, usually that come right off the back. I don't like that, in that it drops the mud straight onto the furrow that you just made, which in wheat probably not a big deal, but when it comes up here and it can ride and get thrown to the side, I think that's better. And it doesn't get thrown like 4 feet, it just rolls to the side of the tire, which stays out of the furrow. So I really like them. It's quite the job to install them all, but I like them. Why do we do 12-inch spacing? Well, that's a really good question. If I had infinite resources, yeah, we'd probably have multiple drills. I would love to be able to seed on 15 to 16 inch centers and 9 to 10 inch centers. However, we don't have that kind of capital. So we kind of find the happy median. And for us, that's 12 inch. Now for our cereals and lentils, that's where I'd like to be. You know, a 10-inch spacing. I think that's the sweet spot for cereals. But they do very well on 12. On the opposite, canola and peas, and we have done soybeans in the past, I think they all need a little more intercrop spacing, and would love to see that at about 15 inches. But we don't have that capital. So they do just fine on 12. I find that canola on 10-inch always looks a little cramped to me. And it cabbages out so well that it blocks all the sunlight eventually, versus cereals are on 15. I think that's a bit far. I've seen good looking results on the Seedmaster single rank, but that's a different story. Would love to have 2 different drills for 2 different times, or even a planter, because like you could plant canola and peas. I think you could really save a lot of money. The final question that we get is, I'm not going to call it a loaded question, but it's multi-part. One guy asked me, with that much weight in that cart and being a toe behind, do you worry about compaction? And then I also had another one that is, why a toe behind and not a toe between? So I'm going to touch on both of those right now. Yes, we do worry about compaction. However, that cart floats very well. There's a lot of rubber on it. A guy I know up near Windthorst, he liked to call it a Jesus cart because he claimed they walk on water. We didn't see anywhere where it was really sinking at all. Now, it is going to create some compaction, especially being behind the toolbar. But your compaction that's going to be serious isn't ground compaction, it's subsoil compaction. So when you're only seeding that deep or less, you're really not getting out of compaction. Or sorry, yeah, you're not getting below the compaction or above, sorry, you're staying above the subsoil compaction. So whether that was a toe between or a toe behind, you would still have subsoil compaction, not topsoil compaction. Now here's something else, is that 1000 or even the 800 is not available in a toe between. I do know there's somebody down at Lampman, I know they've recently switched back to toe betweens and have smaller carts, not for compaction but for traction. They said they were just finding they weren't having enough weight on the hitch to get the full traction out of their tractors. To each their own. Now, the hitch is actually very light in this. There's no added weight on the hitch. So that is a valid point, that if you had a toe between, you're going to have weight on there. Fair. But logistically, having a bigger cart is way better for us. Now, I do like the field finish better, but it's minimal. I've never seen our crops look like this, except for when we're seeding canola in very wet conditions, and that's the only time. And it's not from compaction, it's actually from like squishing and moving the seed and over burying, or mud getting on the tires and carrying the seeds out. So for us, we've ran a toe behind for years now, and we've never seen negative impacts in the crops. We've never seen it go and then a little blip where the tires are and another blip and then We haven't seen that at all. In a perfect world, yeah, you would probably like to see a big toe between, but there's a couple features that or not features, but bonuses or perks to having a toe behind. Number one is, if you ever get stuck in this, you can lift your shanks, disconnect, and throw a toe strap and usually pull yourself out. If you don't have the tractor buried up, if you got stuck on the toolbar, we've got a good sized toe strap in there. We have yet to have to do that since I've been farming. But with a toe between, that's not an option. The other perk in our rinds is that you can see the full toolbar. Now, most of the time, that's not a big deal to not see the toolbar. But, you know, as hoses get older, sometimes you're, because everything's coming forward, sometimes you're able to see, oh, there's some fertilizer dust coming off. Or I've had where a hose gets pulled from the manifold and it's shooting fertilizer or seed. Or say you're on a damp morning like today and you're in pea stubble, you might be able to see the clumping and you can just lift up and out of it or whatever. So I put a lot more value on being able to see the full toolbar than I do on the compaction and yield drag that would, minimal amount of that, attributed to having the cart being a toe behind. If there's any other questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.